Okay, well, welcome everyone. This is Joanne Geer. I'm Executive Director of the Biopharma Research Council. We are an association for scientists across all the many silos of biomedical research. So that includes industry, academia, nonprofit, government, suppliers, and those who love them. We have a wonderful mission, which is to get researchers to talk to each other across all of those different silos. And we look at that world from many different directions, from technology perspectives, from disease perspectives. And this series that we're part of today, Startup Spinoffs and Stories, is looking at various aspects of commercialization. This is a nice busy slide just to share with you some of the things basically we did last year, and we're redoing many of them this coming year, and you'll be receiving information about those. We're doing meetups now. We just had a great one at Princeton University last night on this theme that we go back to over and over again, D3D, data, drugs, diagnostics. And one of our speakers today is Kelly Sexton from North Carolina State University, and this year will be our 5th year doing our Triangle Biotech Research Symposium, and it will be on this theme of data, drugs, diagnostics. That will be in October. We're doing this Internet of Medical Things, which is looking at cybersecurity issues. That's going to be in July in Princeton. We're doing another microbiome program, which will be in October at Kean University in New Jersey. Many of these programs are recorded and available on our website as well, so please feel free to have some fun poking around to see what some of the past programs have been. I'm going to be turning it over to Neha Nigam, who is the person who organized today's program, but I just want to let you know a couple of things. One is that the session is recorded and it will be available for download later, and excuse me, and also that the slides will be available as well. Neha, there you go.
Hi, good morning everyone, and thanks for joining us for this webinar. As Joanne mentioned, we are here today to learn more about the changing paradigm of increasingly dynamic relationships between university researchers and their potential commercialization partners. And to discuss that, we have some experts from the field, like Joanne mentioned, Dr. Kelly and Chris Flaum. Before I deep dive into their introductions, and I know we are all excited to hear more from them, I'd just like to mention that we also have another session planned in May 25th. This will be the director from the Mount Sinai Innovation Partners, and we'd be happy if you can join us then too. So without further ado, Dr. Kelly Sexton, she's actually the Director of Office of Technology Transfer at the North Carolina State University. She oversees technology scouting and development, licensing and venture development at the NCSU. Under her leadership, the office has doubled the number of licenses executed and startup companies launched per year. She holds a BS in biochemistry and molecular biology from the University of Georgia and a PhD in molecular pathology from University of California, San Diego. She completed her postdoctoral studies at Stanford University, and she has served as the executive in residence in NC State's high-tech startup creation program and currently serves on the steering committee for the Blackstone Entrepreneurs Network of the RTP. Our second speaker is Chris Flaum. He's a venture analyst at the Rutgers University Office of Research Commercialization, and he holds undergraduate and graduate degrees in genetics and biotechnology genomics. He has been part of this office since 2012, and he focuses on this group which helps in promoting and supporting Rutgers technology-based startups. He works with all startups at all stages, from opportunity evaluation to company formation, through the product launch and business development. So over to Dr. Kelly Sexton. We are happy and excited to hear from you.
Great. Thank you for that introduction, Neha, and thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm excited about this topic. So for my talk today, I wanted to tell you a bit about North Carolina State University as well as the RTP region, and then describe a basic roadmap for tech transfer and talk about 3 trends that are really transforming our profession, and then close with a couple of stories about some life science startups that were launched here from NC State. So a bit about my university. We are the flagship engineering and technology university for the University of North Carolina system. We're the largest four-year university in 4 states with over 30,000 students and 2,000 faculty. We're a research-intensive university with over $450 million in research expenditures last year. According to the Association of University Technology Managers, or AUTM's 2014 survey, we ranked number 6 among universities in the U.S. for licenses and options executed. So we have a high volume of research and a really high volume of resulting technology transfer activity. NC State is located in the Research Triangle region, along with Duke University in Durham and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Combined, our 3 great research universities have over $2.3 billion in annual research expenditures. Located right in the heart of the Research Triangle is the famed Research Triangle Park. It's over 7,000 acres with nearly 200 companies and nearly 40,000 employees. So all of this makes for a really vibrant ecosystem with entrepreneurs, companies, industry, investors, and great universities. And it all makes my job of technology transfer much easier thanks to this great and vibrant ecosystem. So what would a basic technology transfer roadmap look like? To my mind, it all starts with our inventors. These are the faculty members, the professors, the graduate students who are doing cutting-edge research at the university. Technology transfer professionals work with our inventors to understand their technology. It all starts there. And from there to begin to develop applications in which that technology could be applied, and to begin to think about all of these commercial applications. From there, we work with them to protect the intellectual property, typically through patenting. And then we engage in marketing activities. And this is a catch-all phrase of a variety of activities that are all designed to find a company that's willing to invest in developing the technology and turning it into a product. Once we find that company, and that is small feat, it can be a difficult task, we then execute a license agreement with that company. This is a contract that gives the company certain rights to the intellectual property. In exchange for that grant of rights, the company agrees that they're going to invest in developing the technology. And typically there are some commercialization milestones and a timetable that the company agrees to meet. Once the technology is successfully commercialized, there's typically a royalty return to the university based on sales of the product. Now, importantly, this license agreement can either be with an existing company or it can be with a startup company that the university worked with an entrepreneur to help form. Regardless of big company or small, it's only once the technology is in the hands of a company that the investments can be made to convert our technology, our idea, our invention into a product that can go on to benefit the public good. And so this is really what universities want to do. We want to see products on the market based on our technology. And we certainly can't do this alone. I think it's very obvious to all of us that universities must partner with industry in order to be successful at technology transfer. So, increasingly tech transfer offices are that interface between university and industry. But one trend we're seeing is that, increasingly we're also at the interface of the public sector and the university. And not just in our relations to the federal funding agencies or the federal laws that govern tech transfer through the Bayh-Dole Act or patent law, but also at the state level as state governments turn more and more to their research universities, looking to them to be economic drivers for their state. And there's good reasons that they're doing this. Universities are engaged in cutting-edge, amazing research that does often result in discoveries with commercial applications. We know that startup companies launched from universities tend to stay and locate in the home state of that university. 5 years of data from Autumn show that over 70% of the time they stay located in the state of their university. We know in my state of North Carolina that our NC State startups and spinoffs have a $1.2 billion annual economic impact in our state. So I'll talk about one of the initiatives in my state of North Carolina, and that is the Governor Pat McCrory's Innovation to Jobs initiative. This is a feature of his economic recovery plan, and it was started in 2014. It convened a task force of investors, entrepreneurs, and university leaders to identify barriers to technology commercialization in our state and to come up with actionable recommendations to address these barriers and shortfalls. The work of implementing these recommendations is still ongoing, but already we have one very exciting output from this task force, and that is the creation of a venture multiplier fund in our state, being overseen by our Secretary of the Treasury. And this is a $40 million fund that's targeted at startup companies located in North Carolina. And so this seeks to address that perennial problem that startup companies face, which is the lack of that venture capital risk funding to fund their launch and growth. So we're really excited about this development. Going back to the roadmap, another trend that we see in our profession is that we're investing more and more in marketing activities. And I mentioned before, this is a catch-all phrase. It can mean things like posting our technology opportunities on our website through passive marketing. It means reaching out to technology scouts, cold calling companies, talking to entrepreneurs, a variety of activities all aimed at finding a licensee for the intellectual property. But in addition to all of these activities, it's increasingly more and more involving developing strategic, long-term research collaborations with industry. So what we're finding now is that our relationships with companies may typically involve more than just one license to one invention from the university. We're increasingly working with them to understand all of their technical challenges and connecting them with other researchers on campus. So they may have relationships with several faculty simultaneously. And not just licensing existing intellectual property, but also investing in research on campus so that our researchers can tackle their technical problems. So when you bring together two cultures that are as different as that of industry and academia, you're bound to encounter some friction. But the benefits to this relationship really outweigh the downside. For the university side, the benefits include allowing our faculty to gain a real understanding of the technical challenges that industry faces and to use their technology to address these challenges. This type of research informs their other research programs, and also it informs their curriculum, making them better educators in the classroom. This relationship also benefits the university by providing employment opportunities for our students after graduation. On industry side, they get access to really brilliant people. They get access to faculty who are real leaders in their fields and who can develop solutions to the challenges that industry face that have never been thought of before. They also gain access to world-class research infrastructure and to our students, and that's important to companies as well. So some of the issues that tend to crop up in these research collaborations involve intellectual property and publication. The right to publish for universities is absolutely critical. Our faculty and our students must be able to publish the results of their research not only to advance their careers, but also to advance knowledge, which is an important component of the university's mission. On the company side, they don't typically have that publication incentive. It's not part of the corporate culture. So that's an area where we have to work to bridge those cultures to allow universities to maintain the right to publish the results of their research with a reasonable delay in publication, sometimes to allow for patent protection. When it comes to intellectual property, as I stated before, universities want to see their inventions converted into products. So we typically expect for companies to commit to certain commercialization milestones when taking license to university IP. Companies tend to want to have much more flexibility and control over their intellectual property portfolios. So these are big issues that we do struggle with, but this type of collaboration is so important that it's really critical that we find ways for these two types of cultures to work together. There's an organization called the University Industry Demonstration Partnership that has done a really amazing job of bringing together leaders from industry, and these are the people who manage research alliances, together with tech transfer professionals and sponsored program professionals from the university to develop a set of ground rules for these type of engagements. So they've got great publications about good starting points for these types of research collaborations, and I would suggest that you check them out. The third trend that universities are seeing is that startups are everywhere. We are facing an unprecedented surge in startup activity around universities. And I think there's a lot of reasons for this. Entrepreneur is now a part of our lexicon. It's a fashionable thing to be. Everyone likes to watch Shark Tank. But beyond that, there's some big trends in industry as well that are driving this. We all know that pharma is really outsourcing their R&D, their discovery, to universities and biotech companies. Pharma has moved much further downstream in the process. So universities, in order to bridge this gap, are increasingly relying on startup companies to take these early stage life science technologies, therapeutics, diagnostics out of the university, raise funding to further their development, and then partner with pharma once the technology has been sufficiently de-risked. Perhaps they have preclinical or even clinical trial data. So the numbers bear this out. From 1980 to 2013, the Association of University Technology Managers reports 5,000 startups launched around universities. That's a big number. But then consider this. In 2014 alone, over 900 university startups were launched. It's really on an unprecedented scale. We see it at my university where our startups have nearly tripled over 5 years ago. So as a result, universities are creating new types of positions to help encourage, facilitate, and support these entrepreneurs as they launch these startups. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing my colleague Chris talk about the approach that Rutgers is taking to support and enable this startup activity. And then I wanted to give you a couple of stories of some life science startups from NC State. One starts with a graduate student. Scott Vu was a graduate student at NC State's biomedical engineering program with an undergraduate degree in computer science. And he wanted to take his computer science background and use that to address a problem facing biology. He realized that recombinant protein expression is often a bottleneck, not just for research projects, but also for industry, as recombinant protein expression can, as we know, be very difficult. So he developed a web-based software platform that modulates novel ribosome dynamics and can accurately predict protein expression levels and optimize genes for maximum protein production. As a graduate student, Scott not only developed the technology, but he enrolled in courses to develop a business plan. And I think this is a trend we're going to see more and more, where students don't just want to go work at a company, they want to start a company. And so that's just what Scott did when he graduated late last year. He launched RiboWiz. And RiboWiz is currently seeking strategic alpha customers for commercialization. Another story starts in NC State's College of Veterinary Medicine with Dr. Ed Breischwart, who developed a very sensitive test for Bartonella infection. Bartonella is the causative agent for cat scratch fever. Dr. Breischwart began offering this very sensitive test out of the vet school's teaching clinic. His target patients were obviously cats and dogs and other animals. But at the same time, the medical research was beginning to show that Bartonella infection could manifest itself in symptoms that impacted the neurological system, the immunological system, cardiovascular system. And people suffering from a variety of conditions were reading this literature, found out about Dr. Breischwart's very sensitive test, and came to him saying, you know, I'm a veterinarian, I'm exposed to cats, I have these symptoms, I may be Bartonella, will you test me? And so out of absolute necessity, Galaxy Diagnostics was launched in 2009 to fill this critical void of providing this very sensitive Bartonella diagnostic for humans. I think the success of Galaxy can best be gauged by understanding some of the people whose lives it has impacted. One case study comes to us from Laura, who's now age 22. When she was 15, she began having neurological problems. It began with a loss of peripheral vision, joint pain. It then progressed to chronic headaches, back pain, and on to hallucinations, depression, and memory problems. She saw many specialists and was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia and underwent treatment with a psychiatrist. Her mother read about the work being done by Ed Breischwart and contacted Galaxy Diagnostics. She was tested, Laura was tested for Bartonella, found positive, underwent 3 rounds of antibiotic treatment to clear the Bartonella infection. And today, her vision is back, her psychiatric issues are gone, and she's pursuing a degree in mechanical engineering. So it's really stories like these that make technology transfer so exciting. We get to help researchers get their technology out into the marketplace where it can make a big impact on our society and on individuals. So I hope this talk has shared with you some of the enthusiasm that I feel for tech transfer and the excitement I have about its future. And Chris, I look forward to hearing your presentation.
Great, thank you, Kelly. So good morning, everyone. My name is Christopher Flaum. I'm for Rutgers University, and Rutgers is pretty lucky because we're able to sustain a specialized group whose sole focus is focusing on startup companies, and I'm very happy about what we've been able to accomplish recently. And just for those listening and watching, please feel free to contact me at any time based on the content of this presentation. But also, perhaps some of you may have experience in industry or some business experience, because we're always looking to build our mentorship pool. So please feel free to contact me. So just a little perspective. Rutgers over the past 20 to 25 years has launched over 110 startup companies. And what's unique about, or not unique, but what's great about Rutgers is our vast array of technology. So we have everything from pharmaceutical and medical device startup companies, advanced materials, even agriculture, and we're seeing a growing trend in software companies. And just some numbers, revenues, Kelly mentioned how many times when you license a patent to a company, a big component is royalties. Rutgers has generated over $17 million from our startup companies. And just in 2015 alone, we were able to generate over 1.5 million in revenues from our startup companies. And the New Ventures group here at Rutgers really focuses on the full spectrum, because a startup company in reality begins with the invention. And so sometimes we're called in early on, right when an invention is disclosed to our office, and other times we're called in later on, after there's a lot of proof of concept and a very clear picture of what a product or service might be. And so we assist with the technology assessments, and I'm going to be covering in a later slide a method that we use. A big component of what we do as well is negotiating those licenses to startup companies. And startup companies, especially university startup companies, a majority of the time have cash flow issues. So it's a sensitive issue, because if as a university we like to recover patent costs that we invested in securing patents for our technologies, but sometimes we have to be sensitive to the fact that a lot of startup companies, especially in their first 2 or 3 years, are cash sensitive. So there's this idea that universities crush startups. That's not true, but it is a sensitive issue, because if we demand a lot of cash up front, it could negate growth of startup companies. And so a lot of what I do day to day as well is strategic funding. So we work with the startup team in identifying funding, and I have a slide where I'll cover some of the strategies that we use at Rutgers. And once a startup is up and going and growing, there is a lot of contact that still remains between the university and our startups. And that has to do with business development, as well as potentially renegotiating licensing deals, and helping to facilitate connections between maybe startups and our faculty or other people in our network. And so what I want to cover in the next eight or so slides are 3 main focuses. The first is the idea of developing a strong business case. And through this business case development, we can really identify what technologies are capable of supporting a startup, and also pathways for that startup to grow. Another thing I want to focus on is how essential the startup team is, and what roles different team members can play. And I also want to spend a little bit of time talking about leveraging resources, particularly funding resources, to allow a startup very early on to succeed. And so I'm going to be covering those three major topics with some assumptions. And these are diligences that the Tech Transfer Office usually handles very well. So the first is we're going to be talking potentially about a theoretical business case. So we want to assume the science is real, right? We want to assume that the results are true. We also want to assume that there is a competitive IP strategy, whether it be patents, multiple patents, and copyrights, depending on what the core technology is. And we're also assuming that there's no inhibition in terms of being able to negotiate a deal with the University Tech Transfer Office. So based on these three assumptions, I want to move forward to the rest of my presentation. So the key is to really understand at a university.
We're having an interesting issue with sound here. Chris, I apologize. We're not able to hear you for some reason.
Sure.
Oh, there you are. Yeah, that's great.
I apologize.
Okay, and since I've interrupted you, I just do want to mention that it's a perfect time for folks to enter questions throughout the whole program, and sounds like we're back on track, but you can proceed. Thank you so much, Chris. I think you need to start again on this slide.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I wanted to begin at kind of where a startup starts at a university, and as I mentioned previously, the core technology starts at the invention, at the discovery by a researcher. But really, who picks up the mantle, who has the spark to consider pursuing a startup? At Rutgers, we see a majority of our startups initiated by the PI. So there's a researcher, a scientist who's very passionate about their work, and they really want to take it to the next level, to commercialize it. So they start thinking about ways to do this, and of course startups are a great option. But sometimes, though, we do have PIs that knock on our door, and maybe they talk to a colleague or some friends, and they got the notion that pursuing a startup is a great way to continue funding for their research, many times when they're not able to find other funding through traditional like NIH or NSF grants. And unfortunately, that's not the case, because startups cost a lot of money very early on, and many times by the time our companies are able to generate revenues, particularly in the life sciences, it's many years. So startup companies usually are not the best answer to solve research funding gaps. But other times we have entrepreneurs knock on our door. So either they have a particular industry that they've been following, and they come across a paper that one of our faculty have published, or they're looking for an opportunity. Maybe they went on our website and they saw available technologies, and they come in and they kind of adopt a technology, they kind of adopt a PI, and want to start a startup company around that. And it's a lot different than a PI-initiated startup, because the PI-initiated startup is very many times focused on the science, where an entrepreneur-initiated startup many times is focused on the business opportunity. So it's a much different starting point. And then rarely, but it has happened in our history, we have funding sources that contact us. Perhaps it's a PE or VC firm that has started a focused fund. So we had a case where a large venture capital fund allocated $40 million to a hearing loss fund. And their idea was to find technologies and build a portfolio of hearing loss technologies to invest in, and then through a mixing and matching of different source technologies from multiple universities, create a very strong business case for a startup. And when funding sources come to us wanting to start a business, it's also a very unique, different case, because they're less sensitive to cash flow. They usually have cash up front, and so the negotiations and the final agreements that we negotiate with these sources of startups look a lot different than, let's say, a professor coming to us and wanting to start a company. And so this is a very key slide to my presentation, and it's something that as a venture analyst I spend a lot of time doing, and it's something that is very, very important. And I have in the upper right a logo from NIH, but also NSF I-Core program, and they use lean launchpad methodologies, which is something very similar to the slide that I have here. And so when you're developing a business case, so the questions you want to answer is it possible, is there enough meat on the bones to launch a startup company around this technology? Maybe it's a few patents or some platform technology usually. And the way that we approach it is the technology or the innovation is given. We can't change that. But what we do is then we map on that technology and that innovation multiple what we call product features or capabilities. And this is where it's important that the inventor of the technology is involved, because we'll ask some key questions to try to figure out all the potential features of this technology. And then based on one or multiple features, you then want to map those features onto a potential customer, onto potential markets. And if you can do that successfully, then what you end up with is one or multiple value propositions, right? You're able to have a technology that has certain functions or capabilities that someone in the world wants to buy, that solves the problem for somebody. And a good example of this that I want to bring up is Botox, right? When Botox was discovered, it was discovered with its association to food poisoning, and it's a neurotoxin, right? So just imagine this for a moment. You have a researcher contact their tech transfer office, and they say, I just discovered, or I just invented a very potent neurotoxin, right? And the idea of building a business case around a neurotoxin sounds absurd. And the way Botox kind of evolved over time is it was discovered as basically as a toxin, and obviously the first step forward for commercializing such a thing is during World War II, the Allies considered using it for a biological weapon. So that's a pretty straightforward and narrow commercialization pathway. But what happened was, when researchers were working with this Botox toxin, can prevent and cause muscle relaxation. And so it was used very early on for people who had spasms, like eyelid spasms or shoulder spasms. And so all of a sudden, a neurotoxin became a therapeutic. And so more Ps were developed over time based on this technology. More features were developed and discovered over time. And of course, its largest windfall is its cosmetic use and wrinkle reduction. And currently, Botox is also being marketed as an FDA-approved treatment for migraine headaches. So it's important when you look at a technology that you really spend time developing all the potential features and capabilities of that technology, and then mapping them to a potential market or customer. And so I think it's a very good example where a professor who's focusing, whose technology may look essentially like basic science, but if it's explored and strategically developed, can potentially have many commercial applications. And I had an anecdote on the bottom of the screen that I wanted to share with you, because working in a large research university, a lot of professors invent things that are slightly better than what already exists, and which is fantastic. I mean, you're constantly improving. But when you're thinking about attracting investors, right? It's important that your thing, your invention, is not 1 or 2% better than what exists. It needs to be significantly better, because if I am a wealthy potential angel investor, right, I can sit at home in my underwear eating ice cream and invest my money in the stock market, and in normal financial conditions, make a decent 12% return. So this idea that you're asking an investor to invest in your technology, which is 3 or 5% better than what exists on the market, and they associate it with earnings, there's a big gap. So we get excited when things enter our office and there's data showing that it's 10 times better than what exists on the market. But that's just something to keep in mind, because it's a very competitive market, and if you're just slightly better than what exists, it might not be that attractive to investors, because a lot of capital has to be invested up front to get your slightly better product into the market, and then what price point and things like that. It's a little muddy space. So the result of developing this business case, of being able to tell a business story about a technology, is you get clear product market fits. When you're able to map very closely a product, a feature of your technology to a market. And the way this is done, and this is important because you can go through the thought experiment of taking your technology, mapping all the P's and matching P's to M's, the product features to markets. But it's important that you validate these connections. And the way that validation is done, and it's a model that iCore uses, is what they call, or what Steve Blanc calls, is customer discovery activities. So it's one thing to assume that a particular customer would want this product feature, but it's something entirely different when you can confirm for sure that a particular customer wants a particular product and feature. So it's one thing to theoretically map, it's another thing to have data that proves that these customers want this particular aspect. But also it's important then, once you have this theoretical map, to actually start putting numbers to the market size. And we do market analysis. And so key thing is the overall size of the market. Something that's very difficult, but something that startups can do very well, is actually the final price points. What are you actually going to charge for your particular product for this particular market segment? And so that sometimes can be very difficult. And another thing that we do in a market analysis is we do a competitive review. So we're looking at competitors, and we're comparing ourselves to these competitors. Can we compete? How significantly better are our value propositions compared to our competitors? And then a key point which applies specifically to pharmaceuticals is a clear regulatory pathway. And so when we're able to have this product market fit map, and we're able to validate through customer discovery and be able to put numbers to the market size, and have a clear regulatory pathway, then it's a green light for us, to consider investing the time and money into building a startup company around a particular technology. Another key feature when after you have a business case, or even early on when you just have really an invention or a technology, is the importance of building a strong startup team. And at the university, we have many experts, researchers, clinicians, but many times we really lack the business founders. And to have a successful startup, you really need a well balance of both. You need a motivated, enthusiastic researcher. Many times with therapeutics, you also need a clinician, but you also need a key business founder. And a pain point at Rutgers has been finding enough business founders to match with our technologies and our researchers. But it's important, and in fact, in some cases we may insist before we continue finalizing a deal that our researchers find a business partner, a business founder who's willing to invest a little bit of their time with the project. Another key value that many times is underestimated with startups is building the boards. Now, this may be more relevant to a C Corp rather than an LLC, but board members investing time into building a robust board gives you immediately expands your network. So many times board members are Rolodexes for connections, potential customers, collaborators. And they also provide and can save a lot of time through their experience. If they're very experienced people, they can give very wise advice. Also key to have a good scientific board, and many times, especially when a startup company is looking to seek investment, they build out their scientific advisory board and add some key leaders in the industry that are operating. So it adds a lot of legitimacy to a startup company if you have a strong scientific advisory board. So these are two aspects that many times are overlooked by a startup. A lot of people, when they start their companies, it's a team of 2 or 3 and they just hit the ground running. But there's a lot of value added if they, while they're running, they also look for people to add to their board. And another tip, how do you attract people to get involved and invest some of their time into your startup companies, is things like sweat equity or compensation equity. And so a lot of times when people start a company, the founders get 100% of the equity of that company, right off the bat. But many times a good strategy is for the founders maybe to only get 80% of the starting equity of a company and reserve 20% that can then be used and allocated later on, whether it be to small amounts to board members or to recruit potentially a CEO. And it's also important that you don't give equity away at once. You want to have equity vest over time or based on achievements. So maybe if you're trying to recruit a CEO and you reserve 20% of your startup's equity, and you want to use that to recruit a CEO, don't give him 20% day one, because then he can quit the next day and still have 20% of your company. But maybe you want to give him 5% up front, and then maybe another 10% if he brings the startup through phase 1 or phase 2 FDA trials, or potentially over time. And so these are little strategies that startups can use to help find key people and really build up the proper startup team that's needed to take a technology to the market. And it's also important to identify key zones or funding strategies for a startup company. And like I said, many times professors come knocking at our door because they see a startup as a good way to continue funding their research. And like I said before, that's usually not true. Startups usually don't have the ability to give a lot of money back to support continuing research. But whatever the case is, there are some key pre-startup funding mechanisms that we use, and even if we have a strong business case and a team that's ready to go, we still insist that they look at these non-dilutive funding sources. So one key is internal proof of concept funding. Depending on the university, this is available either through the tech transfer office or through different centers or departments within the university. And so this is great because you may have a great business case, but the technology still needs to be developed a little further. So you can use this non-dilutive funding, this pre-startup funding, to develop the technology a little further. And there's also, depending on your region, external proof of concept funding mechanisms as well. Rutgers participates in what we call the QED, which is run out of the Science Center down in Philadelphia. And it's a proof of concept fund that provides up to $200K to a faculty member to develop their technology to the point where it's a more recognizable product or service. Another key thing that we've been pushing here at Rutgers is the National Science Foundation's Partnerships for Innovation, the PFI, and they have a series of grants, but we've been pushing the AIR-TT grant, and the TT stands for Technology Transfer Grants. And this is, I believe it's up to 400K or at least 200K to be invested by the NSF into developing like a prototype of a technology, and it's a great way to get this pre-startup funding to develop technology further before starting a company. Another big program that I mentioned earlier is the NSF I-Corps program, and although it doesn't really necessarily provide direct funding to develop a technology, it does support financially the customer discovery activities of a pre-startup team. But another stage is the early startup, right? Where do you find money, kind of seed-based funding for early startups? Of course, SBIRs and STTRs are very popular, and they are a source of non-dilutive funding. Phase 1 is up to $150,000 over around a 6-month period, and Phase 2, depending on the agency, can be upwards of $750,000. So these are great for our startup companies to be able to really build a product based on technology. Also, a lot of startups do look for angel investors, and different states have networks. There's also now online platforms, but angel investments are many times key because sometimes you just need that 50K for that one last study to get enough data to really prove that your technology can do what it needs to do, and sometimes angels are a great source. And NIH has a similar I-Corps program. However, it's only available to those who have successfully achieved Phase 1 SBIR, STR. And then some growth, other funding for more mature startups is there's SBIR Phase 2B program. Different agencies offer it, but NIH is most famous. And through a Phase 2 program, it's after successfully receiving a Phase 2 SBIR award, it can be a source of up to $3 million in additional money. Also, it's important to look at, if you're developing a pharmaceutical, is the FDA voucher program. And this is something that hasn't been used that often. I believe historically it's only been used 9 times. But if you develop a therapeutic for a particular list of diseases, the FDA will give you a voucher to essentially jump the line in review. But this voucher is not specific to any particular therapeutic, and also it can be freely traded. So sometimes I believe a recent FDA voucher was auctioned off at over $500 million or something like that. So it could be a great potential source of funding. And of course, equity offerings. Now with the new SEC regulations on crowdfunding via equity, and also finding VCs and private equity funds. So this is kind of a spectrum of funding that we spend a lot of time discussing with our startups and helping them to pick the best strategy and to secure that strategy. And I believe that is my last slide, and I want to turn it over to Neha, I believe, to get some questions.
Thank you, Chris and Kelly, for the interesting discussion. And we are now open for questions. Joanne, do you have any, or can I start with my questions?
I'm just going to ask one question that we have several questions. I'm picking one at random that I think is pretty interesting, and then we can go on. The question, and I've noticed we have a lot of people listening who are from other tech transfer offices, so welcome everyone. And one of the questions I see is, are your offices self-funding, and what are the pluses and minuses?
Well, this is Kelly, and yes, we are in that class of tech transfer offices that is fortunately able to generate enough revenue to sustain our operations. You know, the plus side is having control over our budget, you know, being able to, you know, make additional hires and patent filings when we have the resources to do so. The downside is always worrying about where the revenue is going to come from. You know, it's when you're depending on third parties for commercialization of early stage technologies, predicting revenue is very difficult.
Chris, do you have a thought about that question?
No, it's a great question. So we see ourselves, our tech transfer office sees ourselves more as a service to the faculty and to the state. We are lucky enough to generate enough revenue to, for the most part, cover our expenses, but our office, the money flows from our technology commercialization activities to Rutgers kind of as a bigger whole rather than specifically to our office.
Yeah, and to be clear, we also see ourselves as a service organization, and we also return a good deal of money, around $1 million per year, actually $1.5 million last year, to fund research on campus. But you know, only around 15% of technology transfer offices even generate enough revenue to sustain themselves. So by and large, for every university, you know, tech transfer is about providing service and commercializing research. It's only for the very elite universities and their tech transfer offices where it's actually a money-making endeavor for the university. Most tech transfer offices lose money, and we're here to service faculty and the community.
Thank you. I think Nia has some questions. You want to pick one or two?
Sure. I have this question about the most regularly licensed technologies. So if you have to briefly compare between therapeutics, diagnostics, devices, physical sciences, plant sciences. I know it's a very wide terms that I'm using, but I still want to, I'm just curious to get an idea as to which are the most regularly licensed ones.
Well, speaking for NC State, I think we're like Rutgers in that we have a very diverse research portfolio, and that translates along to the licensing activity that we do. About half of our licensing activity comes from our College of Engineering, so that could be materials, semiconductors, computer science, software. You know, and then we do a good deal of plant licensing. We have a very good plant breeding program, so both traditionally bred plants and GMOs. Pure life science, therapeutics, and diagnostics is a smaller subset of our licensing portfolio, probably around 15 to 20% in any given year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Rutgers has a very similar case as well, very similar portfolio matching. I'll say this though, that certain departments, when they invent something, it's more translational than basic research. So, for example, if a plant breeder comes up with a new plant, it's very obvious. It's a product already, right? It's a self-made product. So those tend to license very quickly. Where a basic science based technology, even a therapeutic, has a much longer path. But in terms of numbering, we reflect North Carolina state very similarly.
Mhm. Thank you very much. And I have one more question. So what happens if a strategy or a deal is finalized between a PI and a company, and then a third party approaches the tech transfer office with a better deal or a better commercialization potential? How does then the tech transfer office sort of take this decision?
Well, if that happens after the license is executed with the startup company, we would direct this third party to the startup company and encourage, hope that those two parties can reach some sort of a sub-licensing arrangement, or perhaps the startup company could even be an acquisition target for the third party.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's correct, because once we sign a deal, common contract law, we have to uphold our part of the bargain. But more than that, especially if the original deal involved one of our faculty members, we're usually very supportive of that. So we're not going to essentially, drop our startup and pursue a better deal. We would, as Kelly mentioned, try to have the third party work and support the activities of that startup company.
Mm-hmm. And in case it has not been signed as yet, you would still go in support of what the PI wants, or would you support the commercialization potential, the party offering the better commercialization potential?
Oh boy, that's a hard question there. Then we would still try to find a workable solution. If our inventor, if we can't get them on board with the plan, technology transfer is not going to happen. There's very few technologies that speak for themselves. Their involvement is absolutely critical to the soft technology transfer components. Very few technologies can just be licensed without any input from the inventor to help smooth that transition. So that is the very rare exception where we actually are lucky enough to have two parties who want to license something. But we would always try very hard to work with our inventor and get them on board with the path forward.
That's great. I have a couple of interesting questions here from our audience. This one's interesting. It has a couple of different aspects to it. If an inventor does not wish to wait the period between NIH grant application and award, how long does an industry collaboration usually take to set up and get funding?
It depends. If we have a master research agreement in place with that company, it's as simple as getting them to approve, say they're interested in your project, and then issue a task order, which can be processed in a couple of days, being routed for signature on both sides. If it's a new relationship with a company the university hasn't worked with before, it can vary. I don't have data for how long it typically takes for these things to be negotiated. If they'll sign our boilerplate form, it can happen immediately, but more typical for the issues I outlined is that there's some negotiation, and that can take weeks to a couple of months to longer, depending.
Does that comport with your experience, Chris?
Yes, spot on. Rutgers does have some master agreements in place with major companies. We've also started a corporate contract group as part of our tech transfer office, whose key strategy is to find those industry partners where we can establish those type of master agreements, where essentially the negotiations happen up front, and so with a particular project, it's basically a statement of work and the budget issues. But as Kelly mentioned, with a master agreement, things are much easier. With a with a new relationship, sometimes the negotiations can take several months.
Terrific. Several points have been brought up that to me lead to potential next webinars, but I won't get into that now, but that's an interesting area, developing those agreements. I'm going to ask the last question, and then we'll ask everyone for some final comments. Let's see. I have often observed that entrepreneurs are ex-pharma personnel that have been laid off. Is it your institution's policy to not provide a level of salary funding to the entrepreneurs you recruit to head your university startups? I guess the question is, people, they may be used to making pretty good money. How do you handle that?
Right. At NC State, we don't pay the entrepreneurs who will be leading our startup companies. We do have a small entrepreneur in residence program where we hire, one or two serial entrepreneurs at a time as consultants to help advise some of our startup companies. But if they decide to leave and launch a company, their employment status with the university ends. We no longer provide funding. Wish we could. I imagine we would attract more entrepreneurs, but we're typically looking for people to put their own skin in the game.
And Rutgers has once again a very similar position. We currently do not actually have our entrepreneurship in residence program. We did it in the past, but many times that's a business decision that will have to be made with based on the availability of funding of the startup company. One thing I'll throw out there though is we've been putting a lot of effort into our postdocs and our graduate students as potential founders of companies, because it's a great transition, because they're kind of finishing up their educational activities, and they're kind of looking for their next stage in life. And many times, especially graduate students, don't have a mortgage. They don't maybe have kids yet, so they can take a little more risk. So we've been focusing a lot of our promotional materials on our graduate students as a potential option.
Well, thank you. I think we could go on and on, but we're going to wind up now. I'm going to Chris, and then Kelly, and then Neha to make some final comments, and everyone will be hearing from us soon. This recording will be up within a couple of days on our website, and we'll certainly send out a note, and there will also be a link to the slides. Chris, would you like to make any final comments?
Just very briefly, I want to thank everyone for tuning in and listening. I want to thank the Biopharma Research Council for hosting this webinar. I think startups are a great opportunity for many technologies at universities around the country.
Thank you. Kelly?
Yes, I'd also like to thank everyone for tuning in for this webinar and making time in your busy day, and also thank BRC for organizing this. And just to say, I hope I've shared enthusiasm about the field of tech transfer and the way that universities are really trying to get more of our research discoveries out of the lab and into the marketplace.
And Neha.
I'd like to thank Kelly and Chris for taking out time for this webinar. I know we've been bothering you with emails and details, so thank you so much for taking out time for the presentations. I, for one, have learned something about the tech transfer process and the startup space as well, so I'm very thankful for that. And thank you, Joanne, for giving me the opportunity to help you with this.
Well, thank you, Neha. You've done a great job, and thank you, Kelly and Chris. I just want to mention there are a number of additional questions, and I will send those to the speakers so they can give you some response. Some of them look like they can easily be answered, some not so easily, but I will forward them for sure. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll reconvene here on May 25th. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.